All right, let's get started. Calling all board members. All right, this public regular meeting of the Board of Education for February 18th, 2025 is called to order. All items being considered this evening are posted on the PPS website under the Board and Meetings tab. This meeting is being streamed live on PPS TV Services website and on Channel 28 and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the district website for replay times. Good evening and welcome. Thank you all for being here. Before we get started, just some housekeeping. Aisles clear, signs below chin level. Treat each other with respect, everybody. And thank you for being here and taking time out of your day. Tonight we're going to be voting on the MESD Local Service Plan, the 2025-26 school calendar, and receiving an overview of special education and PPS. So let's get started. Let's start with the consent agenda, the easy thing first, right? The board members, is there anything that you would like to pull aside for separate discussion on the consent agenda?
Yes, and I flagged this for staff, the field trip.
Sorry, can you say that again? A field trip?
It's I believe it is 7046.
Resolution 7046.
All right. So we'll vote on that separately.
We don't need to vote on it separately. I just, I have some questions that publicly I notified the superintendent I would be asking about it.
Okay, so we're not pulling it, but you want discussion.
Yeah, you asked whether there's anything you wanted a separate discussion about, and that's the one, but we don't need to have a separate vote.
Okay, great. So let's put it on the table so we can start the discussion. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Director DePass moves and Director Sullivan seconds the adoption of the consent agenda. All right, you may begin your discussion.
Okay, so this revolves around field trips that are, and travel that are longer than 5 days. And so going back to 2019, there's been a lot of discussion about extended trips, and primarily not at all a discussion about whether the trips weren't beneficial to the students who were on the trips, but equity to all the other students who maybe weren't traveling. And then the second thing was just making sure that the students who were remaining at the schools still had a experience like they weren't having their homeroom teacher gone for 2 weeks, the curriculum wasn't being slowed. So there were some changes in policy that occurred, and for the last 2 years the districts had the 5-day standard, which is in the administrative directive. And so tonight we're being asked to approve a field trip that's longer than 5 days. It's 2 weeks with 3 staff people going on the trip. And so the question I asked in advance to the superintendent, and I don't know if you want to answer these, but I just think for the benefit that, because this has been a much discussed topic, especially for those students who haven't been traveling, of the new interpretation that it's fine to have them longer than 5 days. So the definition of exceptional, because I think that's, they can be longer than 5 days if they're exceptional, and what the criteria that was new this year versus last year, that these are exceptional trips. And then I have a couple questions after that.
You're asking what the criteria is for me to say exceptional or not?
Right, because otherwise they would be just be limited to 5 days.
Yeah, I think I would say that what qualifies it as exceptional is the opportunity to study and also be a resource for students who are learning English, and think that the opportunity for the class to travel is an exceptional opportunity.
So just, if we're gonna have a different interpretation, is it possible for staff to quantify that in, the administrative directive of what constitutes exceptional? Is it, a group going to Europe for 2 weeks, and not wanting to go on spring break, but a school group going then? Or is it for some other criteria? I just think it'd be important because exceptional, can mean things to different people. So if we're gonna change the interpretation, it would be useful to have that, outlined. The other question I had was, there's an administrator, a teacher, and a special ed teacher, traveling with the group, and, who is paying for those 3 adults to go, and, who's covering the duties of those 3 individuals during that time period? Because it's in March, so students are already out of the classroom 1 week. And so in some cases, depending on the situations, you may have students in a class with their teacher, or maybe their special ed assistant for only 1 week out of March. So just if you could.
Sure. So the trip is being subsidized by Shuren of Portland. It's a nonprofit organization that supports Mandarin immersion. And so they are supporting with flights, hotel stay, and some incidentals for the students and for the chaperones. They cover the full cost of the trip for the teacher and for the administrator. And then the 3 other parent chaperones and the students pay an additional cost to cover the difference between the subsidy and the trip costs. And all the funds have been collected. There aren't any outstanding balances.
Great. And then the final,
Just really quick, just want to add, I think this is also the group that was not able to go on their residency trip because of COVID during their 8th grade year. So, which is why, I think they requested longer than 5 days.
well, I think also in the criteria, and maybe not to suggest your criteria, but in this particular case, the travel times are, significantly longer than most other travel, and the time difference, just not to be suggesting criteria, but just, noting that.
Well, might I add one other exception is that the substitute that they have coming in to replace the teacher is a substitute that is able to teach in Mandarin. So they're able to follow the lessons, and all of the students except for one student isn't going. And that student is a teaching assistant and just in a higher level class, and so that's the only student that isn't attending.
And the special ed teacher?
The special education, so there is only one student who receives support through an IEP, and that student has a family member that's traveling, and so there isn't a teacher who's a special education teacher traveling at
Okay.
the parents' and I don't want to say more to disclose the identity of the student, but
Yeah, that's okay. It looked like from the application that that teacher was traveling. And so then my last question, this is a bigger framing question, and shout out to the directors at my right for, I think 3 or 4 years ago, starting the Travel and Field Trip Equity Fund that allows other students the experience to have exceptional experiences as well, but may not have the community-based fundraising. And so the board did that, added that to the budget, so hopefully we'll be seeing it in next year's budget as well. But the other thing was the district committed at the time to create a capstone experience for all 8th grade students. And so it just wasn't a very small group of students who were being able to have this incredible capstone experience. And a 1-day experience in Oregon is not the same thing as going on a 2-week trip. But could you give us an update, or can somebody provide an update on where we are at that? Like, is that actually happening this year?
yeah, that work lives within our middle school redesign, and so I don't know if we're prepared at this point to offer anything, but I will make sure that we follow up with a report at the appropriate time.
So the district made that commitment in 2019, and we had COVID in between, but it would be great that all middle school, because one of the things, when you talk to middle school students, like, we like to get out of school or have this like field experience, and so that was one thing when the district said they were going to support these extended travel by some groups of students, that they would also do that. So I'm hoping that the report we're getting is that that's happening.
Absolutely, and let me just provide an affirmation. We absolutely believe that all of our students, whether they're going out of the country or they're taking a trip just a few miles outside of Portland, have the opportunity to be involved in an opportunity that isn't a typical experience that they have. And so we continue with that commitment. I know this question is around out of the country and the Mandarin, and you know, what happens when some people go and others don't. And, you know, I just want to state, and I think I said this when this came up as a board item a few months ago, you know, my belief is that we never penalize folks who aren't able to attend. We just make sure that we provide an opportunity to support folks. But the idea of limiting a group to travel because others may not have access just isn't just in my mind. And so what we will do, though, is make sure that we provide the opportunities, report back to share out. We will continue with the budget moving into future years. And it is our belief that the experiences that our students are able to partake in is transformative.
Yeah, and just to clarify, in 2019, when that agreement was reached, it wasn't a either or, it was an and. It was like, and this is an incredible experience for these students, and we think other students should have some sort of opportunity the same. So I guess my question is that actually happening for all of our 8th grade students? Because that was the district commitment. It wasn't an either or, but it was an and.
Yes. Yes.
I have a question or a comment about the word exceptional, and I don't have the policy, the field trip policy in front of me, but is it at the discretion of the superintendent?
Yes.
What's considered exceptional?
Right.
Okay, so,
That my discretion, I deemed it exceptional.
okay.
Actually,
It's nuanced, but I was curious if we hire someone who has expertise to make the decision whether something's exceptional or not versus us as a board.
I'm not describing, I purposefully asked the question. My question to the superintendent in advance was what was her criteria, not telling her what the criteria would be, so being open to it. I do think we should be clear though, because what's one person's exceptional experience is another person's maybe vacation, or, you know, there's lots of different trips that happen under the guise of PPS that actually are different from these trips. And so my question wasn't to say, tell us what the criteria is, like what is the criteria, so it's just transparent, which is I think what we owe to our school community.
I guess I was just asking because if we're gonna hang our hat on criteria, that would change with every superintendent.
Well, context matters, right, with every group. I mean, you know, hearing that these are 8th graders that didn't get to go on a trip during COVID, knowing that there's a substitute who speaks Mandarin and will make sure that there aren't any instructional gaps as a result. Hearing that all costs are covered and some of those other things, I think I weigh. Like every situation is different, so I just have to look at it holistically. I don't have like a rubric or a sheet or a checklist if that's what's being asked. And you know, I would hope that when it comes for opportunities, especially learning opportunities for our students, that we wouldn't operate in a checklist fashion, if you will. But I do, context matters, and I do look at all parts.
I appreciate you because we did have some discussion about kids that were left behind, and at one point before my time, it was a big deal. So yeah, I appreciate the context. Thank you.
All right, and is there any discussion on any other items on the consent agenda? Ms. Brash, I forgot to ask, I believe there's no public comment on the consent agenda, correct?
No.
All right. The board will now vote on resolution 7045 through 7049. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Student Director Consavi, please indicate your vote.
Yes.
Thank you. Any abstentions? Great. The consent agenda as amended is approved by a vote of 7-0, with Student Representative Consavi unofficially voting yes. All right, next up, we have a resolution to approve the annual Multnomah Educational Service District Local Service Plan. Superintendent Armstrong, could you introduce this item?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, can you repeat that, Eddie?
Yes, we are going over the resolution for the annual Multnomah Educational Service District Local Service Plan.
Absolutely.
The longest title ever.
Yeah, so annually, schools are asked to adopt their ESD programs and service proposal agreements, which are approved by the ESD Superintendent's Council. So passing this resolution does not commit us to the services, but instead approves a list of programs and services in which we can decide to use. And I recognize that there may be some questions you all have. I do want to thank Mr. Paris or Dr. Paris for being here. MESD is Assistant Superintendent, and so he's here to answer any questions that you may have.
We probably should put this on the table first, right? And then, wait.
Would you like a motion to get?
Yeah, well, I think, do we do public comment first, or do we
you get
put it on the table first, right? All right, so, do I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 7052, the annual Multnomah Education Service District Local Service Plan?
So moved.
Second. You got a whole bunch of us ready to go.
All right,
We're ready to go.
I'll put, Director Green moves and
Collins.
Director to pass seconds there, split the difference.
We can arm wrestle.
All right, is there any board discussion?
Yes, I have some board discussion. So I asked to have this separated out, related to a specific issue, that outdoor school, that MESD offers, which is outdoor school. And welcome back, by the way. It's good to see you back here. Former Chief of Staff, for those of you who don't know, at PPS. So in the past, I'm just going to back up. We passed adopt a policy that recognizes religious and cultural holidays of significance to our students and families. They're noted now on our calendar. And at the time we did that, and part of this is to create an inclusive, welcoming environment for all of our students. And we used a constitutional test that our chief counsel shared with us that we could use, which essentially states how we can designate them, and we actually actively encourage our principals and school staff and school-based organizations not to schedule things on those days. And the two places where we felt we had less control over, or they weren't just up to our scheduling, was OSAA and all their activities, and the other was outdoor school. And I wanted to separate this out tonight, just to elevate and perhaps get an opportunity for some problem solving around an issue that we had. So I'm a huge fan of outdoor school. Having been a sixth grader, I've gone through it. It's sort of like one of the experiences from PPS that used to be very unique. Unfortunately now, because of Outdoor School for All, it's an experience that all sixth graders across the state have the opportunity to, and MESD runs it now. And we have consistently over the years had outdoor school falling on on holidays in which are very important family celebrations and family events, and that students have been left with the choice of either participating with their class and missing an event, or like going home in the middle of the week and coming back, which really isn't a satisfactory result, or going with a class that isn't theirs. And if you go to outdoor school, like going without your class, it's not really like going to outdoor school. And so when we had it again, this happened again this fall, where outdoor school happened to fall for a family, or families, on the week that Rosh Hashanah was. So as part of that, I had a conversation with Mr. Perrins, Assistant Superintendent Perrins, sorry, about how PPS could, or whether MESD could make adjustments to change this. And I don't know if you would like to share like how potentially we could address this, because I think when I talked to you this morning, you expressed that you felt there were ways in which we could be welcoming to all students. It may be challenging, but we could do it. So I don't know if you want to share from MESD's perspective, and then there's a PPS piece to it too that we would need to take some sort of corresponding action, and maybe a policy change, but good.
First, I'll say Dr. Coakley was very sad that he couldn't come tonight, but he has his own board meeting, and so he sent me here on his behalf to talk a little bit about outdoor schools. So we serve 68 schools and 269 sixth grade classes each year. And so as you might imagine, in the weeks that outdoor school can run, it is very, very challenging to get everybody in. And so we have a form that we send to principals, and they select their preferred time. And then, there's a lot of back and forth. We try to meet the needs of the people who are asking. It is true that we do offer outdoor school during these weeks, and the place that I think we might be able to move is because not every school requests this, so we should try harder to put schools that are not requesting this into the slots where there is a major holiday. Just trying to do a little bit more to support the schools that have populations.
So PPS schools could go through our calendar and identify the dates where we've asked school communities not to schedule things and make their requests from MESD, and you would try really hard.
We would try really hard. I don't want to promise because I don't want to, break my promise. But we share the same values on this subject. There's absolutely no intent not to meet these needs. So we'll work hard to make progress on it.
And so this is, I guess, also a question for the superintendent about our willingness to encourage our principals, or maybe even a district-wide, of avoiding those holidays. And it's not just for students, but also we have staff members that sixth grade teachers who get asked to go on the trips also, who are leaving. I try to imagine it's like if I got a note from the school saying your child is going the week of Christmas to outdoor school, and you can pick them up on Christmas Eve but drop them off the next day, that I don't think I would be a taker. So I'm trying to put myself in somebody else's shoes about what that would feel like and how to avoid the otherness. So I'm curious if that's something that you think that PPS could work with MESD to try and.
Yeah, well, I'm going to, say those same words. We're going to do our best. We did hear from families this fall about the conflict, and again, just with the schedule and some of the conflicts, because there are so many people participating, we weren't able to accommodate, which was devastating and disappointing for the family, and we certainly agree. But we'll do everything we can to work with you to make sure that all students are able to access outdoor school and not miss because of a commitment.
It does look like the survey that goes out to principals can say, like, this week doesn't work. So I would hope we have some sort of consistent policy, because other than we're going to wait for somebody to complain,
I can also point out it also reminds them twice to think about religious holidays.
I'm sorry, can you speak up?
Sorry, the form that the principals fill out reminds them in two different places to think about religious observances in their schedule.
Yeah, I really appreciate it that that doesn't. I can circulate it to everyone else, but again, it's a little bit of the district and MESD making it work, and I do appreciate you sending the form because it does look like you are asking people to affirmatively try and avoid those dates.
Yeah, it sounds like doing as much as you can. There may be more than our school that doesn't want those dates. So that makes it hard too. So
That's correct.
appreciate it.
We'll kind of double down and try to make this work better.
Yeah, I don't know if this question is for staff or for you, but does Outdoor School also serve our alternative schools and contracted alternative schools?
That's a good question. I believe any sixth grader is eligible to go. I don't think we say no to any sixth grader, so I think that would depend more on the staff that was running that program or school. But we have, all the kids are welcome.
Those are the only questions I have. And thank you for sharing all the information. Hopefully we can work something out for our students and family.
Great. Thank you, Director Bryn Edwards, for highlighting this issue. Ms. Bradshaw, I believe we have a couple people sign up for public comment.
We do. We have Ariel Matasser and Mel Berwin. And Mel is virtual, so I'll bring her in while Ariel's coming up.
Great. While you're walking up, I'll kind of go over general rules. We ask that you keep this respectful. You'll have 3 minutes for your public comment. When the red light goes on, that's a sign you have 30 seconds to kind of finish up. We ask that also require that any student identifying anything, please not say them. And then also, if there's any personnel matter, please direct that to the superintendent. All right, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
My name is Ariel, and I am the parent of somebody who was affected by scheduling over Rosh Hashanah, which is why I'm here to give public testimony today. Both of our children attend Sunnyside Environmental School, and our elder son, Charlie, is in 6th grade. And as people who grew up in Portland, my husband and I both have really wonderful memories of outdoor school, and we were really excited for him to get to have that too. We fund outdoor school with a dedicated tax because as a community, we decided a while ago that protecting this experience for all children is worth it. What we came to understand as a family this year is that outdoor school is not actually a protected experience for all students. It's available for some children, and our Jewish child was not made available to him based on our religion. Charlie learned he was going to outdoor school in his classroom surrounded by his peers. That's also where he learned that because he was Jewish, he wouldn't be able to go. Our school, in concert with MESD, and I hear people being like, hey, we're all gonna really try. I don't think that's quite enough. Our school, in concert with MESD, scheduled his week at outdoor school to coincide with Rosh Hashanah. So while Charlie's classmates got excited about the upcoming trip, Charlie sat in his seat feeling isolated and believing he couldn't participate. For our family, this scheduling decision meant we had 3 choices. We could keep Charlie home for the week and let him miss out on the incredible experience that is outdoor school. And this is what Charlie assumed would have to happen. We could, for the first time in his life, ignore one of our most important holidays, which did not feel like it was a real option to us. Or we could disrupt an entire day of work to drive to the coast to pick him up early, to get him home in time for the holiday, and let him experience half of outdoor school. We were able to make that work. But this is an absolutely unacceptable set of choices, all of which serve to marginalize a child's experience at school due to identity. At no point did the district attempt to mitigate the harm that was a result of this scheduling, either materially in the form of unearned wages and travel costs, or emotionally. Instead, Sunnyside's principal showed abysmal leadership, claimed she had no role to play at all, and walked out of a public meeting when asked about it. And anyone else we tried to speak to tried to blame a different player. MESD blamed Sunnyside. Sunnyside blamed MESD. District leadership we spoke to blamed the PAT for complicating the calendar with more days off. Scheduling pivotal experiences in such a way that forces families to choose between their minority identities and those experiences is discriminatory. In this case, you were privileging the participation of kids who weren't Jewish. PPS clearly knows this because you wrote a holiday scheduling statement that acknowledges multiple days for various minoritized communities. If PPS is going to adopt holiday equity statements like the one we currently have, it is the responsibility of this board to ensure that everyone we partner with delivers services and abides by those agreements. Otherwise, what is the point of saying it? If all we're doing is saying, hey, we're going to try really hard not to do that, that's not the same as having a plan of action. And that's not the same as actually protecting an experience for all children. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. I just also want to know that Ariel was my son Martin, who's 23 years old, first teacher. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Next we have, is it Mel Berwin?
Hi, good evening. Yes, my name is Mel Berwin, and I have 3 children who have attended Portland Public Schools, with my youngest graduating this June. I'm here today, though, as a representative of the Jewish community as well. I'm the director of congregational learning at Congregation Neve Shalom, which is a large synagogue in Southwest Portland. And we have about 200 Jewish families here with kids who are in K through 12 education, many of whom attend the Portland Public Schools. And I'm also here to speak to the challenge of outdoor school and scheduling against our holidays, our Jewish community's major holidays. And I appreciate the conversation that you've had around this so far, and that it was raised by your board member. I'm here to request that our Portland Public Schools do follow the holiday equity policy, which this board adopted last year. This policy is meant to ensure that our schools do not plan significant events on the major Jewish holidays, and for that matter, on any community's major holidays, so that Jewish students and all students from any minority faith community can participate equally in their schools as fully as any other student, as Ariel just beautifully discussed. I know that the Jewish Federation tries to support this effort by providing every Portland school with a list of the Jewish holidays that most impact our community, including Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Passover, when most of our Jewish families are celebrating with our communities and have specific cultural or religious customs to follow. The policy also commits that non-district sponsored events, such as outdoor school, are not scheduled on major Jewish holidays. That's the commitment that was signed last year. We know that MESD is the organizer for the outdoor school, and yeah, it's a really exciting, wonderful opportunity for our kids. And my understanding is it's the only overnight experience most of our students experience through PPS. And despite the passage of that policy last year, we do know that there were several occurrences of schools planning their outdoor school trip this year in conflict with our major Jewish holidays and putting our students in exactly the situation and our families in exactly the situation that Ariel described. This is a clear violation of that holiday equity policy. And when our families express their frustration to schools, we understand that the school administrators generally blamed MESD for the scheduling conflict, and our understanding is also that MESD does provide the opportunity for the schools to note the holidays that impact their students in their own communities. When outdoor school continues to be scheduled in conflict with our Jewish holidays with no care for our community, it's our students, our kids who are put in the bind of choosing between their own identity and the school community. And we know that Portland values diversity and prioritizing equity, and we should be showing our kids that every child and every community is equally respected within our schools. And upholding that holiday equity policy gets us one step closer to that ideal. Our request is that PPS schools honor the policy that was agreed to by the school board. This means recognizing the impact of important or extended school events on the Jewish community members that are part of their school community, and working with the MESD to avoid scheduling outdoor school and other major school activities on these dates. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Oh yeah, go.
I just thank you so much. I really appreciate both of you for taking the time to be here, and I agree. Like, if we have the policy, we should follow it. One thing I'm wondering is if there's a possibility to pair what MESD is sending with the request with that list of holidays or with the policy, so that the principals can have it in front of them. And I know we're maybe asking a lot of you to also include the list of those religious holidays, but that might be a helpful way to approach this, so that at least that principal is reminded not just consider those holidays, but here's an actual list of when they are next year, or something like that. And I don't know if you'd be willing to consider doing that, or if the district can make sure those dates get sent out around the same time you send the scheduling emails, or something where we could figure out a way to at least have there be an explicit reminder of those holidays and when they are, along with the form.
We can do that.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna support this, but, I do believe when I look at the form, and I'll share it around if that's okay, I'm assuming, and what gets sent to the principals, but we know that every year we have new principals come into the district, the new rules. Not everyone has the calendar that we have, and sometimes even people who've been around a while aren't aware that we have a new calendar that tries to recognize these additional dates. So I really think there's a PPS action here to comply with our policy. And I mean, right on here, you can mark like what weeks don't work. And I'm assuming schools do that for other things that apply to, like, hey, we have a huge school-wide celebration on this date, so we're not gonna go that week because we don't want the sixth graders to not be there. But we should have the same attention. And again, I feel it's I appreciate MESD providing the latitude, but it seems like PPS has to have more of a system versus, again, we can't count on necessarily every principal. This looks like this goes out during the summer and things change. And so I would hope we'd have a system that we can comply with our policy. And that's why I'm going to support this today, and all the other great things that MESD does. And I love outdoor school, but I also think we should have every student feel welcome in their school community and welcome to participate in what I think is the best middle school experience that students have. At least I did. Are you going to say it wasn't?
Apparently he loved outdoor sports. And so I'm concerned now.
No, outdoor school was a great experience. When I was in sixth grade, I still have my little wood cookie, still. You do too? See?
My soil samples too.
But I just want us to make sure that we are, outdoor school means so much to a lot of sixth graders across this state. And so I don't want us just to get so fully focused on PPS when we have Jewish kids in other districts and other middle schools as well that has the same issue. So I just hope we can have a little grace and mercy as well when we are trying to make sure we schedule these weeks out. So I just don't want us to be just so focused on PPS because we have kids in all other school districts and all other sixth grades as well that has to vie for those spaces as well. And I say that because I used to sit on the MESD board, and we had these conversations around scheduling for outdoor school and all that stuff. I don't think we still own the camps yet. We still don't own them yet, so we are at the mercy of the camp owners as well. So just wanted to give that.
I appreciate that point, and I was also wondering, is there an option where that day, the holidays are just omitted from the calendar? And if they were omitted from the calendar, could outdoor school still work?
It could not. Not for the number of students and number of classes. If we blocked out those days, we wouldn't be able to do that. And it would be significant. It wouldn't, I'm not just talking a couple schools, it would be a big deal.
So are we implying that if we just simply take those out, that not only would a lot of our Jewish kids not be able to go, but there will be several other kids that wouldn't experience it all as well?
Less sixth grade classes could go to outdoor school.
Several other
Yeah.
kids. So a lot of other kids aren't going to go because I guess what I'm trying to understand is if it's just simply saying we're going to take those out, we're going to find some other days and we're just going to make it work and we're going to just shift it around, then why don't we just shift it around? But if we're not able to just simply say, okay, those days are out, we're going to find new days that do work and everybody is going to get to go, everybody will still be able to keep the same experience, then if there's a way for us to do that, then I would say, then let's absolutely do that.
Right.
If we're not able to do that, I would like us to be explicitly clear, because what I don't like to do is to leave stuff for chance. We just need to say it. If we do this, X number of kids aren't going to experience outdoor school, and that's a period at the end of that statement. It's not a question mark. It's not a, maybe, I'm not wiggling room. Like, I think we just need to be explicitly clear and just put it out there. This just is what it is. And now, with that information, do with it what you may. So you either want it, you can figure it out, you're not, whatever. But this is what we have. And outside of this, we have no wiggle room. Now, if that is a definitive, and we provide that level of information, I'm talking about us as a district as well, us as a board, as a team, this just is what it is. I cannot make them do anything. I can make a recommendation, I can suggest, I can say, would you please? At the end of the day, I'm not paying them, and they ain't got to listen to me. And so it just is what it is. We need to let people know what is, and then let it be what it be.
Thank you. I think part of the challenge is also, instead of, I think the big challenge is also, mitigating the impact, right? Like, we can't go in with a sledgehammer saying there's no more, but trying to find the schools where this would impact the least or no students, and those would be the ones that would be going to outdoor school during certain holidays and others. And I think therein lies the difficulty of the challenge, right? We have, I forgot how many schools that you serve,
268, I believe.
Yes,
Sixth grade classes.
and so, that's a logistical challenge. And from the sound of it, it sounds like on both sides, we're working on it. It's not going to be perfect, but we'll try. And I think that's as best, with the amount of staff that we have and things. I think that's the challenge, is trying to, again, mitigate the impact as much as possible. And I think also want to thank the people who came to testify for taking time and sharing the issues that happened to you. It takes a lot of courage to kind of speak out in public, so thank you.
I just
Right.
want to say one thing in
listening.
closing is that I think we have to be careful about assuming where those students are, because in some ways, the schools where there's fewer students, it makes them more other, versus at that particular school, it's a large percentage of the students, and so we better accommodate them, but when there's just one or two, and we're not going to accommodate, I think that even makes it harder on that students. And I think what I heard you say this morning is there is a way to do it. It's more complicated, but I think we from PPS should actually make it work. And if we need to advocate to have something else to make it work, because when I look at the days that we don't have outdoor school, in some ways it's well, that's a statewide in-service day. And it's so we're accommodating a lot of other people, adults, and we don't have outdoor school that week, and yet on a week that's very important to many of our families and our staff, we're saying basically we're still going to schedule things over that. So I think we have an obligation to make it work if it's possible, and it seems just looking at the numbers, it would be. And not every other school district has the same policy we have, so while I would love to advocate for all the other schools. I also think we should stick to our own policies, because if we're just saying something and not actually doing it, then it doesn't feel like we're being true to what we said.
I'm gonna just run real quick now. Whether a school has a policy or not, it's still our kids and still their religious beliefs. So it shouldn't matter if a school or has a policy or is not. We should be respecting folks' religious beliefs regardless. So I don't care if Beaverton don't have one. I still want to respect their kids. I don't care if Hillsborough has one. I still want to respect those kids, because a religious thing is outside of, it's bigger than policy. It's bigger than the school district. That's, you know, that's their soul that they're talking about. So I just don't want us to be thinking like, well, because PPS has a policy and we just have to make sure we do it for PPS kids. This is a religious thing that is way bigger than a school district.
I'm a yes and.
Thank you. Director, sorry, Director.
Because
But I
of
would
the
suggest,
definition.
but I would suggest that, you know, I
Dr.
know
Armstrong,
they had talked about buying the camps at some point. So I know that could be a big help in scheduling stuff as well.
You know, Dr. Armstrong, were you going to respond to that? And then
Yeah, I
Director
just,
Sullivan, and then we're going to go to a vote.
right, and I just wanted to be clear that I wasn't suggesting that we sort of like wait out the holidays but because of Jewish and Muslim being multiple days, maybe if those two were held as like blackout dates, if you will, that nothing was scheduled, like, could that be possible? Not that that would need to be done for all holidays, but where we see multiple days that impact families over, multiple days, that there would be some type of thing. But I guess that still applies even for the two that are in the fall.
It's full now, so if we eliminate time, we will be reducing the number of students who can go.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Director Sullivan?
Yeah, well, I was just looking at our draft calendar for next year, and the major religious and cultural holidays are squared out. And if we took all those into consideration, that would be 6 weeks out of choices for outdoor school. So, yeah, it's hard, and I think Gary said he's on the board, I guess, talking about how hard it is to schedule. So I know you'll do your best, and best isn't always what people want to hear, but I think that's all we can do.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Assistant Superintendent, parents, for giving us your time and answering our questions. Really appreciate it, of course. All right, the board will now vote on Resolution 7052, Annual Multnomah Educational Service District Local Service Plan. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Student Representative Consavi, please indicate your vote.
Yes.
Any abstentions? Resolution 7052 is approved by a vote of 7-0, with Student Representative Consavi unofficially voting yes. Thank you so much. All right, next up we have the 2025-26 school district calendar. Since we already had a presentation by staff on the last time we met, we'll go straight to putting this on the table. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 7050, resolution to approve the 2025-26 school district calendar?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. I have Director Sullivan moves and Director Split seconds. Ms. Brashaw, is there any public comment?
Yes. We have Callie Thorne Ladd and Baya Overton.
Great, thank you. Can just, again, I mentioned the rules before, but just, again, 3 minutes, red light goes off, 30 seconds, finish up. No student identifying stuff, and then please be respectful. Thank you.
My name is Dr. Bahia Overton, and I'm the Executive Director at the Black Parent Initiative. Thank you for having us here today. I'm actually here to, happy Black History Month, but to speak to the urgency of us to move forward with our Center for Black Student Excellence. We've been talking about this for a long time. You know, the relationship between the Black community here in Portland and PPS has been tumultuous and strained, but really overall we have kind of all recognized that there has been long-standing sustained injury and harm to our students for generations. And so the CBSE was a joint effort for us to come together with community. I'm the chair of the board for the Center for Black Excellence, the community side of this, to collaborate with PPS to create some outcomes that are actually sustainable. As we know, just throwing money at a problem doesn't change and solve the problem. However, part of what equity demands is that we have a set of principles and agreed upon standards of excellence that will move our children forward. Otherwise, you just accept that we're just deficient and we can't learn. Okay? So I'm here to remind you that this is an urgent matter. Our children matter, that in every year or so getting a report that says, yes, we are still, disproportionately disciplining your children. Yes, we are still seeing gaps in achievement. Yes, we are still using the same curriculum that is not centered in culture or that our children can anchor to for their learning. And so we have a lot of, the community's here, we're ready. We have a plan. We have standards of excellence. We have evidence-based criteria. We have ways to predict outcomes in a way that we haven't seen before. And so I just, in thinking about this calendar and this year and thinking about the work that we're doing, to not forget about the promise that was made to the community and to take into consideration the historical broken promises that have happened in this community. So that's all I'm going to say.
Hello, PPS Board. My name is Kelly Thornlad, and I'm here today as a board member of CBE. Those of you who know me know I like history and I like quotations, so I want to start with a quote by Dr. King. In his famous speech when he marched on Washington, he talked about that we have come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in a luxury of cooling off or taking the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. He went on to say that now is the time to open the doors of opportunity to all of God's children. And here we sit in 2025 with PPS planning to go out for a new bond. And a key component of the past bond, the CBSE, hasn't even started to break ground, nor have we identified a site for it. In fact, the site has been identified. The fierce urgency of now is still very much upon us, perhaps even more so as we look at the federal level and see direct attacks upon communities of color and immigrant communities across our state and nation. So, King said, this is no time to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism, and I will implore all of you not to take the drug of gradualism. And as you look at the school calendars and you think about the future, it is important to remember what the CBSE is and what is it intended to be. It's not a symbol of advancement, but a place and a strategy to yield catalytic change for students who have been historically left behind and marginalized, as my colleague Bahia said. And it is something that is aligned with the mission and vision of Portland Public Schools. And sadly, and perhaps tragically, it is something that has been moving with all deliberate speed. So I ask you to not leave a legacy that King would be embarrassed by. What is the legacy that you want to leave as school board members? I remember when we celebrated passing of the bond and this whole idea of CBSE and the vision of what it could create. And it's unimaginable to me that we sit where we are in 2025 with so little movement. So, as she said, community leaders have come together to partner with the district in collective action to cash in on our defaulted promissory note. And on this Black History Month, I hope you stay true to this promise and ensure that your stated values are aligned with your stated investments. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think there was a lot of quotable moments in there, not just the quote you quoted. All right. Is there any board discussion? All right. This silence means yes. All in,
I'll
sorry.
I'll just say something. I just want to say thank you because I think having such impactful testimony, I don't like to use the word impactful. I think it's not really a word, but let's just go with it. Just going without it being, without something said, I think we've all had conversations about the importance of moving forward on this, and we hear you and we feel you, and we're listening. And so thank you so much for coming today. And while we're going to move over and talk literally about the calendar, we heard you. Thanks.
Yes, ditto. All right, moving to the calendar, the board will now vote on Resolution 7050, resolution to approve the 2025-26 school district calendar. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 Yes. All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Student Representative Kasabi, please indicate your vote.
Yes.
Any abstentions? Resolution 7050 is approved by a vote of 7-0, with Student Representative Kasabi unofficially voting yes. Thank you. All right, next up we have a presentation on the vision for special education services in Portland Public Schools, and I would like to turn this over to Superintendent Dr. Armstrong.
Absolutely. So tonight is to provide a comprehensive overview of our special education priorities, understanding what students are identified as needing special education services, feedback our team has gleaned from listening sessions, and understanding how we are funded. Our Chief of Student Supports, Jay Buno, will take it from here. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. Give me a second to get connected here. There we go. Good evening. All right. Good evening, Chair Wong, Vice Chair DePass, Director, Superintendent, and Student Director. I'm here tonight as the Chief of Student Support Services to provide you with an update on our Special Education Services program and the program moving forward as Superintendent Armstrong, Dr. Armstrong identified, and the district's progress on our strategic goals and program moving forward. Last year, actually about a year ago, today I presented for you that the Special Education Department had launched a program improvement plan aligned with our Forward Together strategic plan that was developed after a series of program evaluations and significant feedback from students, families, staff, and leadership. This plan tackles longstanding issues of racial disproportionality in our specialized classrooms and the persistent achievement gaps for students with disabilities. It also responds to our families' consistent input related to engagement and belonging in their communities and longstanding research on the effectiveness of inclusionary practices for students with disabilities, and more importantly, the ineffectiveness of segregated specialized classrooms. And specifically, that plan focuses on the strategic plan goals of establishing systems of structures for inclusion, promoting inclusive mindset, building on the advocacy power of our students and families, and reimagining relationships and sense of belonging. So the intentional implementation of this plan, which is frequently referred to as the neighborhood schools plan, has been focused on 8 of our K-5 grade band schools this year, and it continues to be the focus. Over the course of the last 2 months, I have been with our Senior Director of Special Education, Dr. Kelly Charles, engaging in listening sessions. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, but I've been engaging specifically and hit most of the neighborhood schools, and I've listened to successes they've had, experiences students have had that they wouldn't have otherwise had. Students engaging in friendships, students experiencing successes in classrooms and learning in ways they've never had. I've also heard challenges that have occurred with this implementation, from staffing needs, which I'll talk about, to needing additional support with professional learning and other things that haven't happened in the way we've wanted them to. So moving forward, we will continue to focus on this. But with that, though, we won't be adding additional schools this fall, as we will continue to focus on the 8 schools that we have in place to ensure that we're supporting them well as we move forward. Additionally, the special education department has concentrated on 3 areas this year. First, they've prioritized community engagement, and this focus has been directed specifically to rebuild trust and focus on relationship development. They've primarily engaged with 4 main strategies to do this. It's rebuilding a robust special education parent advisory committee. Additionally, they have a special education staff advisory committee, and now this year, for the first time in a very long time, a special education administrative advisory committee. Adding to that, though, we are also partnering both with our new engagement department and an outside agency called Roots of Inclusion to move forward a community conversation that's focused on building a culture of inclusion. And the idea is that we want to learn and engage families more in constructing actions around more equitable and inclusive systems of support in our schools, more building actions to support our neighborhood schools focus. The department's also focusing on inclusion and belonging. You have been and seen invitations to screenings of films that are all focused on belonging, equity, and inclusive practices. We're screening films and documentaries that are challenging each of us, and we have panel discussions talking about what's possible in the systems we create for our students with disabilities. This is all leading up to that community conversation I was just talking about. And then furthermore, like I identified before, the senior directors and myself are conducting listening sessions with our staff at every school. And the focus is to develop and understand themes occurring across the system to address systemic issues that are impacting relationships and communication and trust in the system. Following all these sessions, we're going to co-create action steps and address the issues that are impacting services and support. And then finally, the department is working to create consistent and predictable systems of professional learning, which is currently being implemented. The special education program in our district continues to grow, and the needs of students continue to grow and expand. The areas we see the largest growth are in, and you can see that in the bottom table, are in the autism spectrum area of eligibility, and then also developmental disabilities and students with language-based disorders. At the same time, we of course are seeing a decline in enrollment across the district, which is the reason why our percentage or representation of students with disabilities is continuing to increase. That said, it is not uncommon for urban districts to have percentages of representation between 15, 16, 17%. And there has been periodically, and we've heard this in other areas, concerns related to identification. There's a robust system and process that our teams and schools go through to identify students, including when you're talking about students that experience autism, oftentimes engaging with medical providers and or developmental pediatricians, which is a medical provider, or clinical psychologists. So these processes are quite lengthy in order to be robust and supportive of students and students' needs. Oh, sure.
I had a question too.
does that correlate directly to the number of students?
Is it
Or
like, is it in parity with our representation of Latinx students across the system?
Yeah, I guess maybe that would have been maybe this another column I needed, which is to see like whether that, if it's disproportionate.
It is a little bit more than the representation. I don't have that specific data off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I don't want to put a number out there that's not correct. I will say it is a little higher than our overall representation of Latinx students. There is a number of reasons that could impact. I think disproportionality is something that we are very concerned about. It is one of the reasons why we have developed the special education improvement plan and the neighborhood schools plan, and we are tackling ensuring students are not only identified right but served well. And so it's difficult for me to say how each individual student is identified as eligible, except for what strategies we're using to address it, which includes language-specific assessments, specialists that support our evaluation teams with culturally specific and language-specific assessment, and then training and support to do it, and then ensuring students are served in their community.
I had a similar question about the disproportionality, and I would find it helpful to have, to graph it, you know what I mean? So we know where there's larger gaps for the population. Also, I just want to clarify on the two tables on the left, the one that's in blue and then the one below that, it looks like so the actual number of students has gone up that are identified as students with IEPs has gone up since 2019, and also in the graph below that, it looks like just real numbers are increasing. Is that true? As real numbers are increasing, and so are percentages. Real numbers.
Correct.
Are going up even as we're losing population.
Yeah, so the top blue bar there is the number of students we are serving in special education. And so from 2021 to 2024, you can see an increase in the number overall of students in special education. Of course, that same time frame, you see a decrease in the number of overall enrollment. So that's the 47,000 to 44,000 number. So yes. Then on the bottom, and of course the table's backwards, so I apologize for that. You see from 21-22 to 24-25, the top one is specifically the number of students identified with autism spectrum disorder. And so in 21-22, there were 895 students across PPS that were eligible or identified with that specific disability. And then this year, there's 1,108 students. So we're seeing an increase in the number of students we're serving, which also indicates an increase in the level of need. And that's a trend across the state of Oregon. So
is that attributed to more students are being diagnosed?
There's probably 4 reasons for that. So yes, more students or more children across the system or across the country are being diagnosed with autism. So here's the 4 reasons. We're getting better at identifying autism. There was a change a few years ago in how autism was identified. So within that, a change in the definitions. There used to be different. So it became autism spectrum disorder. There used to be autism, Asperger's, pervasive developmental disorder, and then a different diagnosis within the DSM that meant something that was almost autism. So what they did was in the DSM-5, they went through and said this is all autism spectrum disorder versus different types of diagnoses. So that didn't change the number of kids that had that experience or that were neurodivergent. What it did was said this all is the same etiology, but it's all on a spectrum of impact.
Okay, and then one last question, sorry. There, on the total students with IEP, American Indian, Alaska Native, 0.9% of our total school population?
0.9% of the students that receive special education services are
Okay.
American Indian, Alaska Native. So what I will do, and I apologize for not having this on this slide, is I will add a column that identifies what the overall enrollment is so you can see the comparison.
That'd be helpful, thank
Yes.
you.
So,
I will just say, Mr. Bruno, I went ahead and Googled, and I'm with the help of the superintendent, because Google wasn't fully opening for me. It looks like it's not terribly off from the percentages from the 23-24 numbers of enrollment at the schools, at the district overall. So I don't think these numbers are reflecting much of a disproportionality, just for what it's worth, maybe a couple percentage points at most. So he can make that for us and we can see it, but just anecdotally, it's gonna be off by a couple of percentage points here and there, but not majorly. Thanks.
so I'm sorry, did you, Director?
No, I was just saying that I'm noting questions down, but that are coming to me, especially after being down at the Capitol on yesterday. But I want to see if you're going to be able to get through. You may already have something set up for me to answer those, so I don't want to just jump in because I got my questions ready, and I'm noting whether you answer it or not. So I'm just thinking.
All right, so I'll press
I'm
on.
loud, though.
I'll press on
Yeah.
and then open up for questions. So,
Jay,
yes.
I'm sorry, Dr.
Oh, no.
Yes, so I just want to be clear. So it sounds like really there aren't that many more kids with autism. It's just diagnosed differently.
Across our system, we are seeing more students with autism, and that is the reason why. That is one of the reason why, and it's not just in our system. Across the state of Oregon, we are seeing more students with autism and developmental disabilities, and that is one of the reasons why we are seeing an increased need for staff and staffing support in our schools.
Okay, so when you said they were divided into kind of 4 columns, if you put those all together, would that be the number?
That's how one of the shifts in eligibility became. That does not explain the increased need.
Still more numbers. Okay, thanks.
Just really quick comment or question. Part of the other reason for the increase in percentage is also that, from what I understand too, is, public school provides services and it's not necessarily required for other educational institutions like private and stuff.
So, I'll move forward and then have opportunity to answer more questions. So, within special education, there are some key indicators outside of just compliance that we reflect on to understand the impact of our programming. These include academic achievement, LRE, or the amount of time students spend in core instruction, and then also a student's overall sense of belonging, graduation rates, and our post-secondary engagement rates. So this is our academic data. And oftentimes, you don't always see this in the overall academic achievement reports. So overall, PPS as a system outperforms the state quite significantly in comparison to other students with disabilities. So we are the yellow bars, and this is ELA and math achievement data. At the same time, weren't satisfied with our overall achievement rates, and we still do outperform other students with disabilities in the state very significantly. Moving on, the graph on the left is our LRE data. So when I'm talking about LRE, that's jargon in special education. I apologize for that. That's least restrictive environment. So what that means is within special education, it's the amount of time a student with a disability spends in a general education classroom with their general education peers. And so the focus and purpose of special education is to create access for students with disabilities to general education. That's its entire purpose. And so that in an IEP matters. And so part of that is we keep track of the literal amount of minutes. And so our LRE data shows that over 80 to 83% of our students spend more than 80% of their day as part of general education. And so frequently you hear conversations about we are trying to be inclusive. We are already inclusive. That is what we are supposed to be doing, and that is what we are doing. And this graph and this data shows that that is true. We are the orange on the left. The rest of the state is the blue. The table on the right is the successful school survey data. So overall, in our K-5 grade band, the successful school survey data, specifically the students' data this year, showed a pretty significant increase in our scores across the board in student sense of belonging and student engagement. This was true, and even more so actually in our neighborhood schools. There was 3 and 6% and 4% and 6% increases. So in the 8 schools alone, they saw as much of and or as more of an increase as the average across all the rest of the elementary schools. The bottom graph shows...
Can I ask a question about that graph? Sorry, I'm just clarifying on this. I'm not trying to... But what's the difference between a K-5 grade band and a neighborhood school?
So all of our neighborhood schools are in K-5, K-8. They're all K-5 or K-8 schools. So when I say K-5 grade band, I'm just meaning like elementary schools.
Elementary schools only versus all the schools
versus
generally?
middle schools or high schools.
Minus the like focus options or something?
They could be a focus option.
Okay, all right, okay, thanks.
The bottom one is our completer rates. So it's graduation rate, basically. So we are the blue. The orange is the state. So PPS, we continue to exceed state average for graduation rate for students with disabilities. This year, it shows, it's not a good graph because it shows like there's these major blips between years. Although this last year we did have a drop off a bit. So we went from 76 to 69%. So we aren't at parity with all the other students, general education students. Some of that is because some of our students stay for transition programming, so they stay till they're age 21, because that's part of how we serve students in special education. We do well. We're not where we want to be yet. So moving forward, I did identify that we're doing listening sessions. We've hit about 60% of our elementary schools so far. We are going to be moving into our middle schools and high schools, and of course completing all of our elementary schools. What we're hearing across the board is staffing. Not just we need more staff, but filling positions, substitutes. We're hearing, and I already identified this, some challenges with the implementation of neighborhood schools. We're hearing about increased needs of students. So students are coming into our programs with increased needs. Specifically, difficult time is the transition from kindergarten, or into kindergarten, I apologize, from early childhood special education. We're hearing about resource limitations. So staff would like more support or increased support from central office. A system of support for both paraeducators, teachers, and administrators for professional development, which I talked about. There's administrative strain, so this is talking about both principal and central office. There's just not enough people to get around to provide support. And then there's a theme of inconsistencies. So there's this view that some schools have things that others don't. And so, I'm just reporting what we're hearing. So following up with this, what we'll be doing is, again, co-creating actions with our staff to address this and ensure that these are no longer.
I have a question on the previous slide.
Yes, sir.
Could you share more about how these listening sessions look like and how students are involved in it?
So these are specifically focused towards addressing the needs of staff right now. So what we do is we contact the special education staff at a building and the building administration, and then myself and the senior director of special education, we go and we engage with them. We have some prompts that we go with, and we just take their feedback related to their experiences. So right now, we are focused on special education staff specifically. We will and are moving to community through that community conversation, and can and will move. I apologize every time I touch them. To students differently.
So I'm glad you got the listening session. So what are the next steps? So you identify what they're saying. What is our next steps? And
so next steps is to engage with each one of the advisory committees, which are representative of different aspects of the staff. And well, first of all, we will communicate out and make public what the themes are. So this is the themes thus far. We'll finish the schools. We'll make public what the themes are. Then engage with each one of the advisory committees to develop specific actions as a result of each one of the themes, and then implement the actions that the advisory committees help us to develop.
so on these lists that you have here, which ones of these do we actually have control over, and which ones do we not have, and how are you going to distinguish the two?
So, for example, and I appreciate you asking that question, there are staffing needs is a complex response. So, and I'm going to go into some funding here in a little bit. Oh, look at that. I broke it. Yeah, it's not working at all now.
No, we can hear you.
Oh, it is. Okay. That was in the chat thing. Anyway, we have no control over what our allocation from the state is, right? But for example, how we determine what a caseload looks like, we do have the ability to determine, like, what a caseload for a teacher, a special education teacher is at each school. We have the ability to collectively make a decision on what that's going to look like. The issue is we have to determine what a trade-off for that is. So if our budget is only, because that determines FTE, right? So if our budget is this much, then we want special education teachers to have a caseload of 25. But right now they're 28, and we know that that's going to cost this many FTE. So I don't know, are we going to have less professional development days? Are we going to, there's trade-offs within decisions that are made, right?
So those type of decisions, are you looking at those coming out of our general fund budget? Because, you just said we are capped at what the state is going to do. So and the reason why I'm asking is because, listening sessions is great, but if we don't have like an implementation plan, just having conversations for the sake of having conversations doesn't really move our kids further. And so I just wanted to make sure that, when we're listening to and we're talking about, student needs and we in relationship to staffing needs, that we're not just talking, that we can actually have a real plan, because if we know the funding is not there. So if you say, okay, we got a 28 caseload per teacher, well, where are those resources going to come from that's going to bring it down to 25? Or we're just saying, oh yeah, we do know what the issue is, and then we just know what the issue is.
Well, thank you, because I think that identifying the things in that we can make actions towards is important. And so they're within the current budget that we have and the resources that are allocated, we make those decisions right now. So, if we are going to make shifts in things, and so I picked the first one because it is one that we probably have limited control over. Others, we have a lot of control over how we're going to implement shifts in that. So, part of implementing these actions and engaging these teams and supporting what the actions are going to be is going to be being transparent about what we can and can't change. And we are doing that right now in our conversations with the teams in response to what we're doing. So, because otherwise, you're correct. You're just setting the system up to not accomplish what we're trying to do, which is heal the system. So.
I
All right.
just wanted to make
sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No,
I'll be short, I'll be quick.
that's why I stopped. I won't be.
That's what I know. I think like having the conversations is good, and that having the conversations gives us data to go to our legislatures, which you both did. Thank you so much. The counselors or the commissioners who went, thank you. But if the trend line is that there's more students and a higher percentage of students that greater need, don't these listening sessions kind of inform that we need more budget? Or we need more budget because we're gonna need additional staffing, and we're trying to spread the burden throughout neighborhood schools instead of concentrating. But doesn't all of this data, the listening sessions, kind of tell us that and inform what our actions are?
So a definite theme is the focus on caseloads and additional staffing. So that is clear. And so yes, that is a theme that we're hearing. There are other themes that we heard related to just communication and clear and consistent communication, which can be controlled, right? There's systems of professional learning that are predictable and scheduled, that can be controlled. Those things don't have to do with budget and funding. Those just have to do with ensuring practices are in place that are predictable. People understand what are happening and go a long way. And that has nothing to do with whether or not a caseload is 28 or 26. And so those things matter to special educators. So yes, we know and understand and want and fully agree with the fact that special education is not funded well. I'm about to go into all of that. And you all, for the most part, already have that information, but I'm going to do it again. And we need more resources to support our kids well. And we need to staff schools with special education resources better. And there are things that we need to do differently as a system to support not only our special educators, our general educators with special education. So.
Thank you.
Nope. See, it's not just me. Okay, thanks.
We need to give Terry a second. He's doing something magical. I want to make sure that Terry's ready before we...
Yeah, he said, wait a minute, sorry.
That's what I'm saying. Yes, he did. He was very subtle. But he definitely said, give me a second. I want to see what this does.
While we're waiting on Jay, just to, kind of get it out. Oh,
Okay.
Very good.
I'll wait till the end.
Okay, so my question, when I was doing my, some of the listening sessions with families and communities that were impacted by special education, and when we were looking at we were talking about the neighborhood model and how it was rolled out, and how a lot of families felt like we were moving too fast because we did not have enough stuff in place. How are we going to ensure that kids that had one-to-one care, that they were going to be served? People that had special eating needs, how are they going to be served? People that had, there was a lot of concern there from families. Not that I don't believe that it was that families didn't believe that it could work. They didn't understand what all we were putting in place to ensure that it was going to be that it was going to work for all the students, and because our numbers are rising. And so I think it's imperative, it's extremely important for us to highlight that and acknowledge it, that we heard you, and we're going back so that we can figure out if we can make this work, or should we make this work when it comes down to it, and then be able to clearly explain why. So I love the fact that we're doing a pause so that we can come back and address it. One of the things that I'm concerned about, however, is with all the students that we are serving, they got IEPs and the 504s. What are we doing, or what do we currently have in place to ensure that all of those kids that should be reading or moving at a different level, what are we putting in place to ensure that they're reading at the level that they should be reading at? It may not be the same level as everybody else, but even those students should be able to, those that can, be able to advance at the levels at a pace at which it meets where they're at. So what are we intentionally doing and putting in place so that we can ensure that that's happening? And then that's one piece. The other piece is I went to Boise, and it's amazing. And again, I've said it before, and I'm gonna say it again. My hat goes off to every single solitary special education teacher that is in a classroom, because I was in the classroom at Boise for like half a day, and when I left, I was crying a little bit. I was exhausted a little bit. I mean, I was trying to help, and then I was making things worse with my help. Like, I mean, I can't even really explain it, right? So I'm trying to hold a kid's hand, and then they pull me to the floor, then I get on the floor, and then they're mad that I'm on the floor with them because I found out that I was in their space, and I didn't know that, but they were pulling me. I thought I was trying to help, and the lady that was in the class, she was trying to warn me, but I didn't get the messages. I didn't get the cues. Then they had a device, and they were doing an amazing job. I don't know how they were doing it. That classroom was bananas. It was bananas because they only had 2 people in that classroom, and there was no way that those 2 people were going to be able to manage all the stuff that was happening in that classroom. And I left. Like I said, I think that's what made me cry a little bit, because it's just like you walked out of the classroom and you felt like you helped, and yet you knew I haven't done nowhere near enough, right? It's nothing that I did in there was enough to do anything at all, and I felt this sense of helplessness. And so, again, I'm bringing it up because I don't think there's anything more important in our city than how when it comes to our school district. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. How we support our kids that are in special educations, have IEPs, have 504s, and then what we do with our literacy. I don't think if you ask any parent in the district, there's nothing more important than those 2 items. And if I'm real honest, I'm going to say that special education how we manage and support our kids in special education is actually higher, because those parents and those families, they feel lost. They feel like they're bringing their kids to this space, and they're just being there, and nothing is changing with them. And then when you start looking at the numbers, and you start looking at the data, and you start seeing that no movement is happening, if it's not happening in GP, general population, how much less is it even happening in special education? So I'd like to hear from you what are the 3 top priorities from you as to what we're going to see change, where we're going to see movement, and how we're going to see accountability for the transformation of our special education department. And this is your moment, Jay, to shine. This is your moment. I can't do anything else besides sit the ball on the tee for you. This is not even baseball. This is not even a slow pitch. This is me setting the ball on the tee for you to knock it out of the park.
No pressure.
What do you see as your top 3 priorities as where we're going to see special education be transformed within our district, where families are going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe that my kid is advancing to this level, the level of accountability that we're going to see, that you would like to see across the entire district from the top down, and then from a financial, and I'm stopping. From a financial perspective, your hopes around why we as a community need to come together and rally around what it is you're doing and what they're going to get from it, the with them. What's in it for me? I'm done talking. It's your moment. Go, Jay.
You know, last year I sat down to do this presentation and you told me I had 3 minutes.
Take your time.
Yeah. So here's what needs to happen. So first of all, we need to collectively advocate, and I want to send appreciation to each one of you and the superintendent for coming down to Salem yesterday. And send appreciation to President Bonilla, the PAT leadership, everybody who came down to support for the bills for potential additional funding for special education. I think it's going to make a difference. So anyway, I think that is huge. I think there's movement towards that. I mean, obviously, have no idea what's ultimately going to happen, but I think it's a possibility. I think that's a huge thing. But to your point, re-engaging our families is pivotal. Family participation and family support in the work we do for students with disabilities is not only essential, it's pivotal to success. And so that is one of the reasons why I have emphasized a couple times now our engagement groups, and then in addition to that, this focus of a community conversation around what is next steps for inclusion and action around inclusion, but not just at the district level, but at each individual neighborhood school. So that is one thing. We do need a system of professional learning that is consistent, predictable, and focused for our paraeducators, our administrators, and our general education teachers. That gets at how to support students with disabilities in your classroom. That not only supports literacy, but it supports as how you engage students when they are in your general education classroom to ensure they're successful. So getting at your question about literacy, and of course this is my work, all of my work is around dyslexia, so I can actually, I'll answer this question for you. Students with disabilities are successful in literacy when we have a robust, successful core program that they access every single day. They then access the general education intervention supports, and then on top of that, they receive special education. We actually do well across the board with our students with disabilities, and we need to do better, but that is how we successfully support our kids with disabilities, by doing well with our core programming, and then also providing resources, which we do, and we need to do better with, but we have some things like the Wilson Reading System and some other resources that we have for our kids that have more significant disabilities that we need to support our teachers better with through professional learning as how to use them, and which we are in process of doing and will continue to do to ensure academic achievement. The other thing is focus on IEP-centered practice. Each student with a disability that receives special education services has an IEP. That IEP actually identifies exactly what their special education services are. So that dictates what services are specifically, and what I mean by that is what additional instruction that they are receiving to ensure success. Parents need to understand the power of that, and so do our staff, to ensure that the students are making progress. That is what defines each individual kid's program. We need to continue to focus on the neighborhood model. We need to stop sending kids out of their community. That will interrupt disparities, that will change the trajectory. That was put together by our community and the input of our families and our parents that are part of our focus programs. There's been substantial amount of research done in special education that says that specialized programs are not effective. We need to stop doing it. The last thing is we need to focus on customer service and re-engage with our community advocacy organizations, which as a system, we haven't been successfully engaging with because they're our partners. They're not against this. So those are my things.
So I'm just gonna piggyback on to Director Green's piece. So I like this wheel. And we know we've heard a lot around parents and the lack of staff with keeping up with IEPs and 504s, right? That's been a big concern. At least I went to a couple of schools and stayed in their special education class as well, and you hear some of their concerns around staffing, support as well. And when we talk about, Dr. Green talked about how do we know that they're getting to the level that they're supposed to be at? Like, how is that being monitored? How's it been implemented and how's it been monitored? How can we as a board know, okay, these kids here, just like we have benchmarks for all of our kids, how do we know that they are getting from here to here?
So we track, so I hit this a little bit and I apologize for not being, we got a little bit off track in that, but individual students' progress is monitored through their individual IEP. So that's hard to report out across the system. We monitor the effectiveness of a special education program across the board through keeping track of our academic achievement, graduation rates, special education engagement rates. So we actually keep track of what students are doing after they leave us. So whether they're independently living, whether they are engaged in further education, or they're employed, any of the three. So, and then we also keep track of the LRE data, and then the successful school survey data. So these are and I shared this is why I shared these pieces of data with you. These are the things that, like, as a longtime special educator, longtime special education leader, these are the things that I look at to see whether or not we are on track as a system or whether we aren't, because these are indicators of successful special education programming. And I really pay attention to where we are in relationship to the state and other districts around us. Now, at the same time, you know, our academic achievement data here is, I mean, we are, in comparison to other districts in Oregon, significantly higher, and we are only at 30% or 40% achievement, you know, meeting criteria or whatever the appropriate description is, which that's not satisfactory.
Because that's a 35% means 65%.
I just threw numbers out there. I can't really see them right now, so.
Gotcha. I mean, the other half of that is not meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
So, in the blue bars are the state of Oregon. So all the other students with disability, or the average of the students with disabilities across the state. So, again, what does this say? It means we are doing something better in this district than other districts for our kids. What does it also mean? It means that we need to do better.
We got a lot of work to do
And
because
I'm
we're
gonna
happy
use the
at
same,
the bottom.
and I'm gonna use the same scenario that we use when we have that conversation with our regular kids, right? I don't care if the other parts of the city state are doing worse, right? We have obligation to our kids to make sure that we are giving them the best we can, and at 70-some%, I don't think we're giving them the best we can. And I know that could be from state funding and all kind of different variables as well. But I just when we compare the worst to the worst, that doesn't make me feel any better. You know, as a board member and as a parent who had a student on the IEP, I've seen when IEPs have been how children have been supported with IEPs. You know, my daughter was an IEP when she was going to Fabian, and because of the support that she got from those teachers, Now she's a senior in college, right? And so I know firsthand when you get the right support, when you have, you know, folks pulling for your kid, how it works. So, you know, just forgive me that just because we're doing better than, you know, the bottom, you know, I know we can do better because I've seen better.
Director Hollins, I've lived that same life, and you're not going to get an argument from me, so I understand. At the same time, I'm responding in the sense of it is a data point that I pay attention to, and I understand completely what you're saying. Anyway.
I'm sorry, Miss Director Split. I keep seeing you trying to throw your hand up. Just put it out there and say it loud, say it proud. Let's.
Mic's not on. I feel like you have some slides you'd like to finish, but I also just want to ask some questions, so I'm not really sure if you want to, if you trust that we realize that you're underfunded, or if you want to go through those few slides with us, or if we should move on to conversation. You
So
are welcome to let us know.
I'll quickly do this just for general knowledge.
Then I'm up.
And then I will answer all the rest of the questions. So as you know, we are funded through ADMW, so that's a weighted model. So we get an additional weight per student up to 11%, and then it's cut off. We're currently at 17%. Additionally, we have federal funding. We supplement with a student investment account, and then there's this thing called the high cost disabilities account. So overall, just to jump through, because I know you all know this, last year we spent $162 million specifically in our special education program. We received in special education funding $77 million. So this is special education funding specifically. So it doesn't mean the general education funding those students also produce. So when that's taken into account, we received $143 million. So that is still short of what we spent. So where does that come from? Of course, you all know it comes from general fund, it comes from SIA. So when I say that when I say special education funding, that includes federal funds, that includes high cost disability. I know that you've all seen the various memos related to high cost disability. The high cost disability fund, of course, is the federal requirement that states receive a portion of, but then states have to supplement it for students whose programs cost significant amounts of funds. In Oregon, that means more than $30,000. In the data you see a lot, I'm referring to 22-23. The reason I'm doing 22-23 is because we're always a year behind on that, because we submit and then we get funded a year behind always. And then also there's a reconciliation process. And so the finished data, the finished finances right now that we're working with is 22-23. We won't work with 22-23-24 until next year. And so we submitted for $60 million worth of programs, and we ended up receiving $9 million. Reason we received $9 million is because of all of the submissions across the state. The state is able to reimburse at 40% right now, so that was automatically cut down to $24 million, and then our portion of the $55 million budget was $9 million, and that's just how it works. So anyway, right now the state is looking at they're not looking at a different way, they're looking at adding more to the budget, which will be a significant help to our system if that ends up going through. The last thing I wanted to show you is our overall staffing rate, or our overall staffing FTE. Every year we've added, and it hasn't been a lot, but we've been able to add FTE to special education teachers. In the last couple of years, we've added special education teachers, added school psychologists FTE, SLP FTE, and we've added paraeducator FTE. I think that sometimes there's been narratives that we've cut. That's not actually what's happened. It's not been a lot, and don't get me wrong, with the increasing need out there, and generally with the understanding of what we're hearing and what we understand, it's not enough. It's just this is what we've done. this is what we have. And then I did this part already. So, questions?
Jeez. All right. A couple of comments and maybe some questions will come in, but I think you know that I'm a parent at Hayhurst, which is a school that has one of those programs still that you're telling us are not the best according to research, but we still have it's SES, but I thought it was social emotional skills, but it's not. What does SES mean? Oh, it is. Okay. So we have a social emotional skills classroom at our school. So I have like kind of a unique perspective spending a lot of time at our school. I'm there for K through 5 lunch. And one thing I've seen is just a real commitment to those kids who are in that program, spending lunch and other times throughout the day in general education classrooms. It's been a real shift over the course of the last year. So I just want to say that there are changes happening, like clearly at our school, for example. And we also have had pretty decent staff retention despite a really, really, really hard few years for the staff that work in that program at our school. So I guess just wanted to point out that like the fact that these folks have these relationships with kids is just really important. And so, keeping them, retaining them is so important. And I know you probably work really hard to make that happen. And I think those listening sessions for folks that were feeling very unheard, I think is really important. I do think it's important to follow up on them, but sometimes just being asked your opinion when that hasn't happened in a while really matters. And I'm sure that really has meant a lot at Hayhurst, which I assume you've been to at this point, but if you haven't, I hope you'll be there soon. One thing I also wanted to sort of put on the record, and this is for you and for others working on the budget going forward, we have an assistant principal at our school. Sometimes if a certain number of students are there, then you get an assistant principal. As staffing decisions are being made for next year, I really encourage you to keep an eye on those schools that do have a higher burden as far as having a large caseload or having one of those special programs. Do you have a name for what they're called generally? We have SES, but I'm sure there's like an umbrella term for them.
We call them umbrella. The umbrella term's like a focused classroom.
When there's a focused classroom or two, like there are at our school, to make sure that the administrative needs are considered. You might look at our school and say, that's not that many kids to have an assistant principal, but as you know very well, we have to have 2 administrators because that SES classroom, those 2 SES classrooms take up, and those students take up so much time, from paperwork to just managing situations that happen all day, every day, from my experience. And so just wanted to say, I'm sure we're not the only school in the district that has that dynamic. So as everyone's approaching the budget, kind of keeping an eye on that and making sure that we, as we're making cuts, because we have to, really trying to make sure that we're considering those schools that have that added dynamic with a lens on that situation where, for us, if we were to lose that second administrator, I just don't even know how that could possibly work at our school, seeing how busy they both are with students all day long. I don't even know when they get time to do all the paperwork that they're supposed to do. I'm sure it's because they work at night. But I really just want to say thank you. I'm really grateful to hear about the vision. Look forward to talking more offline with you because, I'm sure can imagine I have a lot of questions, having had the experience of 5 years now or I guess 4 years now, spending a lot of time, pandemic closure, at Hayhurst and seeing the experience my kids have had with kids in their classrooms and also the kids in those programs, or that program. And so thank you, and I'll move on.
Yeah, thank you, and I want to emphasize, we have amazing staff in our schools that work really hard in support of kids, and they do it every single day, and there are really cool things happen for kids. And when I talk about how, a way of implementing a program is something we need to move away from, that doesn't mean that people aren't doing it well and they're not working hard to do it, and it isn't perhaps maybe working right now. It's that there may be a better way, but they are working very hard in support of kids, and it's appreciated. So,
Thank you. I just want to make sure we have, before we finish up, time for people we haven't heard from yet. Student Director Consavi, do you have questions?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could share some of the major impacts it would have on us if the state doesn't fully fund education fully fund special education services?
Well, I don't know, and I don't believe that even with the potential legislation that the state's ever going to be able to fully fund special education. I do think that it's potential that there might be some improvements, which in anything that could be done is going to be helpful. So I think that, so one of the things that we've done, and the reason I brought this table back up is we spent the last 8 months, and it was in something that I was going to talk about. So I'll talk about it now. So thank you for asking that question. One of the things that we've done over the last 8 months is we've engaged with our association, with our principals, and with other special educators to implement a level of needs staffing model, for example, what that is allocating staff to schools within the pie of staff that we have that's based upon students' level of need. And so that's been developed by staff, including principals, including other administrators, including special ed teachers, psychologists, PAT representatives. It was a large group of staff members. So even if we end up having the same amount of overall FTE, so 267 special education teachers, how we allocate them to buildings that reflective of student IEP driven needs versus a ratio, like a concrete ratio that's no matter what, could have an impact could impact a community differently than just a ratio that's regardless of need. So thinking about supporting and implementing a program that way or differently is a way of approaching special education regardless of what the overall allocation is. And then the other thing, of course, that we're paying attention to is what's happening with our federal funds. So either way, we're going to be supporting our kids. So.
Thank you. Director Sullivan?
No, I just appreciate everything that you've shown us. It's very frustrating because I know you can never staff it to the way you want. You said you've got the level of staffing model that you developed with staff. I'm just curious, is it hard to find special ed teachers right now?
It is still a hard to fill position. It's not as hard as it was coming out of the pandemic, but that's a loaded answer because it is still very difficult to fill positions. It is difficult to fill substitutes positions also. Sometimes, like the position the situation you were describing, it may not be that the classrooms don't have the allocated staff. It may just be that people are out that day and they don't have substitutes. And a lot of times in what I'm hearing, that actually is the issue most of the time, is that it's not that there's not adults allocated, it's that people are ill that day. And there's nobody coming in to fill the jobs. Sometimes it's because there's not enough adults allocated. So I'm not saying that's not always the issue. I'm saying that sometimes that's the issue. So yes, we continue to experience special education teaching jobs as hard to fill. Consequently, for example, we held a hiring fair for special education positions that it's still February, early February. It's late January, I think. It was 3 weeks ago. That we offered, I think, 15 to 20 letters of intent right now to prepare for our season, and we will need them. It was one of the most well-attended hiring fairs that we hosted since I've been here. So I'm not saying that means that we've hit a shift. What I'm saying is that was one of the most well-attended hiring fairs that has been since I've been here. So.
Yeah, because I think, didn't we change it a little bit with the agreement with the union that we can start hiring a little earlier, I think, at least regular teachers. I don't know about special ed.
yeah, special educators, do amazing work, and anything we can do to recognize that is helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Quick question? Finish up.
Okay, I haven't asked a question. So I'm gonna start with just thanking you and the staff, everybody who's in classrooms every day, just, given Director Green's description, I know it's hard, challenging, and rewarding work, and so I really appreciate all of our staff. I appreciate the systemic approach you brought today. And I think it's all the more important now that we hold our families closely with what's happening on the federal level with the concern about what's going to happen with potentially 504 plans, IEPs, and the associated funding, but just created a lot of uncertainty for our families. I appreciate the neighborhood model because it has so many advantages for our students. A lot of times they can be with their siblings. It's the most familiar, inclusive, welcoming environment for our students. So if we can make it work and we staff it, I think it's totally the model we should be going for. I'm going to key off a little bit of the issue that Christy mentioned. A couple years ago, we received data on where the focus classrooms were, the SES classrooms, and that disproportionately they're on the east side. I think Hayhurst was the only one that had two, but there were a whole host of schools on the east side that had two classrooms, and I know many of them, so I'd like if you could recirculate that just so we can sort of see.
Sure.
Because I do think that for me, it's a question of staffing, and I'll be interested when the staffing models come out, how we're supporting those schools. Is, for example, Marysville, which I think had two, but now has had one, but just the absolute critical need to have a vice principal or AP to handle a lot of the just paperwork and all the additional things that came with supporting a school with those two classrooms. I'm going to click even further down about Marysville, because I think one of the places where the neighborhood model is not going to be able to be implemented is in, this is again specific to Southeast Portland, but at Lentz, where the switch happened to an all, it's all Spanish now, and it's a neighborhood program as well, but it sounds like from parents and staff is that students who need special support who would have been at Lentz because they're in the Lentz neighborhood are all getting transferred to Marysville, and I'm curious what sort of additional staffing and support schools are getting when the neighborhood model won't work because of a model the district has.
Sure. Okay.
That was the question.
Okay. I was just pausing to ensure.
It wasn't a Herman Green question.
No. Well.
A 10-part question.
So Marysville is implementing the neighborhood model, but you're 100% correct in that there is some uniquenesses of that school and the community it's serving because of things happening around it that are making it so that we are needing to staff it differently. And one of the things that we did encounter this year that we're trying to, that we will be planning for differently as we move forward is the ability to adjust because of students transitioning in mid-year that weren't predicted for. And I don't mean in September, I mean like in October, December, that are all students with high and unique needs because of situations like you described. Like they may have been or slated to go to this school, but it's a focus option or a specific Spanish-speaking school, and they don't want that, or aren't accessing that. So it can happen, but those are considerations that have to be taken in. And so moving forward, we've had conversation about levels of support specifically to that school for that specific reason. And it's not the only school that we will have to consider for uniquenesses as we go around and intentionally plan for it. There may be different reasons, but there's other schools that have other uniquenesses in their community that we'll have to be mindful of it as we're staffing them. I can hear you.
The other overlay they have is also a nearby shelter where they have a number of students coming from. And I'm curious how we support those families and students that, I mean, does their IEP just travel with them, or how prevalent is that? Because
So
it seems like they have everything sort of coming into Marysville without the adequate.
So what we're in conversation with the administrators there, a lot of times, actually most of those students, some of those students come with IEPs or have IEPs. Some of those, quite a few of the kids that come there, they may not even have an IEP. Not that they don't have needs, they have significant needs. It's not a special education need. And so one of the other things that we're working and supporting Marysville with is they're part of the community schools work, which gives them an additional social worker and social work time. And so I think that's been an additional support for them.
So that got added?
They've had that this year, and they'll continue to have that. But that is a consideration. That is, it's another variable. So not only do you have kids coming to there that don't want to or aren't wanting the Spanish-speaking program that are high needs, but you also have the shelter. And sometimes the needs of the students that are being referred to aren't even students that receive special education, but that doesn't mean they don't have high needs. So.
Thank you.
I just think we have to remember that, like the class you saw, there may not have been many kids with IEPs. It's just little kids are hard to deal with. And there's a lot of needs besides people with IEPs.
You're absolutely
We have
right.
to remember that.
And the reality, these are people's babies at the end of the day. These are not IEPs, and these are not 504s.
Children.
This is somebody's son, this is somebody's daughter, this is somebody's child. So I know that we have the letter game and the number game that we got to keep up with, but at the end of the day, the brass tacks, what this rolls down to is this is not an IEP and this is not a 504. This is a child that we're supposed to be figuring out how to support, and I want to make sure that we're continuing to keep that as the focus, regardless of what the paperwork says. So.
Thank you. You're absolutely right.
Great, I think, is this concluding the item, or were you about to comment?
Yeah, I was just going to make a quick comment, and then I'll let you conclude, and then
Yes.
we're done with this. This is directed at Director Brim Edwards. When you made a little slight at Director Green, I want to defend Director Green. It's showing an amazing showing of self-awareness. He has not only approached me once, but 3 times about implementing a clock and a mute button for every board member, being the only one,
Except for me.
except for also to pass. So if we get another one, we may be able to put this on the table. So I just want to also just point out there, I know that I know you probably are going to speak to this as well, but in our state legislature in Salem right now, HB 2587 is now currently making the rounds, and it is the one that's lifting the cap from 11% right now currently, if you don't know, for those 3 people who are watching and everyone in here. But if you tell everybody you know, that may expand to 87. Yeah, 87 people, I don't know. Yeah, people, yeah, just tell everyone you know. It's HB 2587. There's also another bill, which is also going to increase funding for high disability costs as well. Yeah, thank you.
Your mic wasn't on.
HB
2448.
2448. Please call your representatives, tell them to support this. What I learned from another superintendent that testified from, I can't remember, I think it was Estacada, Oregon, with its 11% cap, which it implemented back in 1991, right, when the Bulls were awesome and we're still using DOS. This was implemented back then, and it hasn't changed since then. And what I also learned was that because of this, Oregon ranks near the bottom in terms of how much money it supports our special ed students. And like Director Green said, these are our kids. These are kids. They're real people. They need to count too, not just 11% of them, all of them. So the fact that 7% of our kids are not being funded, we are funding them, but we need to ask the state to also make sure they count them as well. So please call. And again, the issue is also we just need more people. And we need more people helping these kids, and this is going to help. So please do something.
So
I don't want to take your last word away because I
That's not
realize
a
you
last
like
word.
to
Go
do
for
that. But I just want to say, and to back you up, and I don't know if other people have seen this, but there has been this AIM report everybody's been waiting for on the QEM, the quality education model, where they did a review of it. It came out yesterday. It's very long, and I've only really been grateful that other people have read it and sent some good quotes. But one thing that I know is that it said specifically that we have a far lower cap than peer states, and that it just doesn't make sense. So that report that just came out is now data-driven, saying that our cap is far too low. So just, I know how much you like data, so I wanted to tell you that that report has your back.
Can I add a couple things to that? Would
Yes.
you mind? So there was another bill heard yesterday also that we were part of, but we didn't comment on because it's not part of our programming, but it would benefit our kids, which is the Early Childhood Special Education Bill. The reason is because the needs of kids coming into our system are growing, and the more resource and support that they can have, and that's MECP to support kids coming into us, the better kids are going to be coming into kindergarten. So I think that's a huge thing also for us to support, and it's part of your, it's part of what you have supported. The other thing is the Columbia Regional Programming, which is of course PPS too, and so that is another area that we need to continue to advocate for because it is typically not funded until the entire budget is set, and usually isn't adequately funded, and that is a system and structure that supports our students with low incidence disabilities. So you're talking about children with vision issues, children that are deaf, and students that experience autism. So.
Excellent. So just 3 points. The first one, I think Director Wong covered with the advocacy, so that one's done.
Yeah.
The second one was to invite you all to visit some classrooms with me, students who are served with IEPs, to walk some of those spaces. I would love to be able to do that with you in the coming weeks or months. And the third point was, as we're trying to be strategic, as asked by the board, of bringing educational topics to the board. I don't think this is the perfect venue, but I would love feedback on if this is format, time, style, information, what you're looking for, or if there's any other tweaks that, or any tweaks that we can make for upcoming agenda items, as we'll continue to present to board leadership some educational program agenda topics for the coming meetings. So I just would love to hear from you, maybe in email or in our one-on-one sessions, if you think about it. So, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Buno. It was awesome.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for, sharing all this. It's a lot of work went into this, obviously. Thank you. All right, next up we have just kind of a quick update. I want to keep this hopefully under 10 minutes, and then we will adjourn after this. On the 2025 general obligation bond. Does anybody want to take the lead on an update? Director Brim Edwards.
Thanks. Sure. I just wanted to provide an update to the broader community about the bond. So of course we had the referral on the 7th, and last week the board set the direction for the cost reductions. I understand that some, if not all, of the design advisory groups and the steering committees are reactivated enough to work, so that's great news. In addition, the board received a letter from our Climate Advisory Committee supporting and affirming the direction that we had around all electrification as a long-term investment for our schools. Hopefully we'll be filing the actual paperwork for the referral this week, which should activate more of the campaign. There's a PAC that's been set up. It's called Portlanders for Safe and Healthy Schools. Thanks you to those who have already contributed, and a big thank you to the Fund for PPS that is stepping up in a big way, not just in their advocacy support for the district, but also provided a $30,000 sort of seed funding for the campaign to hopefully leverage that into $1.8 billion. The campaign's hired a general consultant, Jeremy Wright, who has hired also a campaign manager, and we have a fundraising staff, that's Tony Morse and Colin Erickson. Jeremy worked on several of our last bonds and also our local options, so we have an experienced general consultant on board. In addition, we have a website that is yespdxschools.com, so people, if they want to contact the campaign, can contact the campaign there. Also, it has a link to the donations page as well. It will be, it's bare bones right now. It will be populated in the coming days with more information about the bond itself, and also ways in which people who are interested in supporting the campaign can do that. And I also want to give just a little shout out to JJ for offering to connect students in the bond campaign. So thanks, that will be much needed. And that's the report.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Can you say it again?
No. Yeah, we move to no. Great. Thank you, Director Brim Edwards. Is there any last words before we adjourn? All right, everyone go home. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.